The big, beautiful bill lands on President Trump's desk, but is it a win for America or just the rich? Congress passed it without spending cuts, and now the deficit grows. We ask our political experts, can either party ever cut spending in a way that truly satisfies the American people? Catch the full breakdown on Politically Conscious today at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? It's your mental activist, Montoya Smith. Welcome to episode 34 of Politically Conscious. I got my brother in arms, Emil Bryant, in this thing, political consultant, expert political consultant. So we weed through everything that's happening in politics. We really should do a show every day because it's moving a million miles per hour. We're hoping, just so y'all know, for those who are big Shelley Winters fans, we're hoping to get him on with us today. He may not be on camera. If we get him, we definitely like to tackle these politically conscious shows from all sides, if you will. I have Emil representing the left. I say far left. He doesn't agree with that. And then our brother Shelley is able to join us. So we're going to get him on representing the right here in a second. Again, he'll be off camera here pretty soon. Shelley, if you can hear me, brother, I know you said you wanted to be off camera. I don't know if you're settled down. So I'm going to kind of keep that in mind before I bring you on the live. But with that said, Emil, go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself, and hopefully we get our brother Shelley on with us here in a second.
Hey, Montoya, it's always good to be here with you. We have been doing this for almost a year now, and we really are starting to see some things transform. My name is Emil Bryant. I'm a political consultant, author, and speaker. My responsibility to my client, who is a candidate, is to help them tell the truth. The people can handle it. Even if they don't like it, if you tell them the truth, they make better decisions. Always tell the truth.
Now, I love it. I got our brother Shelley Winters. Brother, just checking in with you. Can you hear us? And if you can, we're glad to have you. As I always say on Mental Dialogue, I'm going to bring it to the Politically Conscious Show, Black on the show. So glad to have you with us if you are tuned in. Can you hear me well, brother?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep. You don't need an introduction, but you are of the Shelley Winters Show. So in my eyes, you're world famous. I mean, you might think you're just United States famous, but I think if I traveled overseas, I might know somebody who knows Shelley Winters. And if I go to Jamaica, I know somebody that knows Shelley Winters. So what's up, brother? Let them know who you are. We're gonna get started with today's show.
I'm a B-lister in Fulton County, bro.
A-list in my book, brother. A-list in my book. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. We're obviously talking about the big, beautiful bill that just passed. So we're going to just start with the clip, and we'll let y'all, if you're your first time watcher, letting both our experts dialogue about it from their perspective. But let's go ahead and just kind of set the stage with this clip.
Taking a live look in Washington now, where Congress delivered a legislative victory for the president today. The so-called One Big Beautiful Bill is now headed to the president's desk. Erica Brown explains what it took to pass the massive spending plan and the potential impacts.
House Republicans handed President Trump a big win on his so-called Big Beautiful Bill.
The yeas are 218, the nays are 214. The motion is adopted.
Lawmakers passed the massive budget bill after a day of tense negotiations, with Republican leaders and President Trump himself working to wrangle support from GOP holdouts.
He helped answer questions and articulate his vision and what this bill will mean for the country and his agenda.
The legislation significantly boosts spending for border security, immigration enforcement, and defense. It also extends Trump's 2017 tax cuts, increases the child tax credit, and ends taxes on tips and overtime pay.
The One Big Beautiful Bill is for the people who don't have lobbyists in this town.
The Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries delayed the final vote with a record-breaking 8-hour and 44-minute floor speech in opposition to the bill.
We're here, Mr. Speaker, to take our sweet time on behalf of the American people.
Democrats voted against the bill unanimously, citing changes and steep cuts to safety net programs, including SNAP, the Food Assistance Program, and Medicaid. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates Medicaid could be cut by roughly $930 billion, with nearly 12 million people at risk of losing health care coverage.
Shame on this institution if this bill passes. That's not America. We're better than this.
President Trump is planning a White House signing ceremony for his signature legislation on the 4th of July. Erica Brown, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Emil, we'll start with you. Is that CBS cut kind of just lays out what is on the table? It's July 4th. We probably should hear some type of signing today. But your thoughts as they kind of laid out kind of both sides of it, if you will. The Democrats, as you said, unanimously voted against it with 2 Republican holdouts, but it has passed. Your thoughts, Emil?
Yeah, no, this bill was ugly no matter how you sliced it. And the problem with it is that they got 0 Democrats to vote for it. Now, I know that's, we're in highly partisan times, highly politically charged times, but you got to think through it because there were several Republicans they had to whip the vote for in order to get them to vote for it because it was ugly for them too. And it barely passed a House that was supposed to have been much easier. I'm 100% clear that this bill is going to harm more people than it will help. It helps the wealthy elites. It harms the least of us. It puts tons of money against ICE, who's already doing draconian things in this country. So you can imagine even more draconian things because they'll have much more money. They've blown through their budget this year, and they're going to have a budget that's probably in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 times what it was this year in the next 5 years or so. So what are we seeing? We're seeing a lot of money go to a few people for reasons that not all of us agree are good.
You sound like a leftist talking paper right now. Just messing with you.
I want to hear what Shelley has to say because I know he got something better than I do.
No, that's all good. I like to highlight from to the Love podcast highlights that they said they kind of miss you, Shelley, but they love Emil. So I'm just letting you know, people miss you, brother.
So from the very beginning, when the bill was first released a couple weeks ago, I was very much against the bill because it failed to do anything that Republican Congress people who ran in 2024 for re-election or as newly elected, newcomers. It failed to do the 2 basic things that everybody ran on, and that was cut spending and decrease the deficit. So now to these points, now that it has passed, there are some good things in it.
I think we may have a bad connection.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
A bad connection. Yeah, we can hear you now. Give it another try. We may have you have to come back out and come back in. I know you're moving, so we'll give it a try. Go ahead and keep talking right now.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just give it a try.
Yeah, but I don't know where I dropped out.
I
don't know where I dropped out, but
you said there's some good things in it. Some good things in it was the last thing we heard.
Right. So, yeah, there's some good things in it. For instance, to Emil's point about the billionaire tax, the left really has to dispense with that talking point because it really is not people realize it's not factual, and they know it's kind of silly. If there's a class of people who, by and large, pay a lot of an outside share of their population into the taxes of the country, into the coffers of the country. Very rich people in various ways pay taxes into the country, into the system. So the billionaire tax cuts, I'm getting a tax cut. If you pay taxes, you're getting a tax cut. You're going to pay less to a government that many on the left believe is systematically racist, evil, hates poor people, whatever, go on and on and on. So a tax cut allows you to pay less into that beast that you're so terribly afraid of and think is so horrible. That's the first thing. The second thing, and this is more important, poor people are getting a tax cut. There's a tax cut in there of about 20-something% for people making under $15,000. So that's on top of the fact that they're probably getting benefits. So they're going to get more of a refund. I mean, so this is in the bill. Opportunity zones are being brought back up. This is in the bill. As to the Medicare and Medicaid, the numbers dictate that vast majority of people that are going to be cut off of Medicaid and Medicare are people that are not supposed to be there in the first place. Now, that being said, I have a big problem with the way they're going to be vouching for people that who should or should not be on there. And I feel like the government is going to do a lot like insurance companies where they pick and choose who gets help. And that I have a problem with, but I'm going to see how that plays out. But to call this bill doom and gloom is kind of hyperbole. To not recognize there are tax cuts in there for working class people is an outright just mischaracterization purposefully. And that's my thoughts on it.
Now, fair enough. And one thing I'll bring to the table, because if you don't know, I'm really into numbers, if you will. And so one thing that you highlighted, Shelley, just as a data point, and a lot of people, I'm just saying this because people have never heard it. This is not a partisan statement here. This is just the numbers. And so 10% of our country pays about 50% of our overall tax numbers or whatever. And that's just kind of saying the numbers as is. Kind of to Shelley's point in that sense, just because it's kind of pushed to his point from a hyperbole standpoint. Whereas while at the end of the day, extending the 2017 tax cuts, basically what keeps it at like the billionaire class, if you will, tax cuts, they were at 39% prior to the 2017 period. So they're keeping them at 2% less. But even at the 2% less, they still end up paying about half of our country's money that we bring in via tax money. Just want to kind of.
But
let me say this.
That's a partial story, though. That's the problem with this conversation. Is yes, they're paying a lot in taxes, but they're also earning an outsized portion of the wealth in this nation year after year. So they're getting more money while the pie is increasing. Their share of a larger pie is also increasing faster than the pie is increasing for the smaller people. So yes, they should be paying more taxes because they're getting more wealth. The wealth is flowing upward through this bill. This is just one of many ways that wealth is flowing up. We can't just say, well, they pay a lot of money in taxes. We knew that in the 40s and 50s. The difference is that the wealth created in this nation is also flowing up to them faster than it's flowing to the rest of the population. That is the reason why they're paying more in taxes. That's not because they're smarter or better. They're literally manipulating the tax code to increase their wealth faster at the expense of everyone else. If you don't say that, you're not saying the whole story.
Shelley,
But the whole story is that I'm getting a tax cut as well. And so I'm not in another man's pocket. If a person has created first of all, wealth is created, it's not earned. That's the first mistake that you're making. Their wealth is earned, it's not created necessarily. You don't create wealth. You create opportunities to make money, but you don't create wealth. That's the first thing. Second thing is when they say the tax cuts benefit the rich and they get the largest tax cuts, well, of course they get the largest tax cuts. They're paying the most money. So if you cut someone paying $1 million in taxes every year and you cut his taxes and you cut my taxes, of course his is going to be more. He's paying more. So his cut is going to be higher. Now, as to the fact of what people earn, I have no problems with what people earn because I dream of being close to earning that myself. I have friends right now who saw this tax cut. They would never say it publicly, but they make high seven figures. This tax cut saves them tens of thousands of dollars. And all of these are black men. And so what do they do with those tens of thousands of dollars? They'll reinvest it in other smaller businesses. They will buy advertising on Montoya's show. They will recirculate that money. Working class people buy things. The rich, the wealthy recirculates the money, which benefits the working class. So this idea that you're going to tackle and say to somebody, get in someone's pocket and say, well, they're benefiting from it. Of course they are. They're wealthy. They're wealthy. All wealthy people benefit.
Let me do this.
I'll always push back on that, Shelley.
That's fair. But let me do this for the sake of the show. We got cuts. So the cuts that kind of bring us, y'all can still kind of say some of those things inside of the cuts. Let me honor some of the people that are watching. Thank y'all for watching. The 5 F's to Love Podcast Network says Trump and his team have no plan and will approach this as they do everything to date. They will use a hacksaw and cut. No way will they be taking a surgical approach. Someone she says, Shelly, stop the noise. But let me go ahead and play this next cut before y'all respond to her as well. Again, just kind of putting things in perspective. We're going to try to beat through these cuts as fast as possible.
Yeah, I would answer it in this context. Momentum is important. It's important in sports. It's important in politics. And we need to keep the momentum going. I mean, President Trump has secured the border. We had the Iran successful mission there. We had what he got at NATO, all these countries anteing up their 5% to help out with NATO, and on it goes. And so now we need to pass this, make sure we get the growth started that we need to get started, give people the tax cuts that they deserve, families what they deserve, and then you move on to the next step. But don't stop the momentum that is so strong. There's a reason why President Trump's polling numbers are off the charts. They're the highest of any Republican president in modern times because he's doing what he said he would do, and the people of this great country see the results. So let's keep that going by passing this bill, and then we can do exactly what Senator Graham said. We can come back for another bite at the apple with the second reconciliation package.
You hear Senator Jordan at the time rallying to vote for it. Obviously, it's passed now. But he was highlighting from his perspective things that are going well and that momentum is what it is. When I see that cut, what I think to myself is, am I living in two different Americas? Because based on which media I'm watching, people seem to be having two completely different experiences, American experiences right now. But I wanted to let you respond to that guy saying, hey, let's pass this. Let's take another cut at the issues that all of us still have with the bill. Go ahead, Shelly.
Shelly? Oh.
Yeah. You respond first.
Yeah, whatever happens, I can't see it. The clip doesn't play for me, but you said Jim Jordan, so I can assume.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
it's all right. It's all right. Don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it. But
no, let me do this. Let me set you up. Let me set you up. I didn't know it didn't play for you.
No, I'm familiar. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear it or you can't see it? Or
I can't hear nothing. It just goes a screenshot says live, but that's not important.
Okay,
I'm okay.
Yeah,
I'm okay.
Let me say one thing. Then I got you. So all we heard was Senator Jordan highlighting that the momentum currently right now, when he was pushing for the bill, he was highlighting that things that went well with NATO, things that went well in Iran. So this bill needs to be another thing that gets pushed to help out the working people of America is kind of what he highlighted. So go ahead and respond to that. I didn't know you couldn't hear it, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's if there's some good things in this bill. Emil said earlier to his point that this, squeaked through because a lot of Republicans had many problems with many parts of this bill. Remember, this is a huge bill with a whole bunch of stuff in. It's virtually impossible for any party to agree on everything in such a huge bill. So it passed, right? Many of us, like I said, admitted to, are mad that there's no cut in spending or more cuts in no cut in spending, and there's no deficit reduction. I'm reading a great book by Bill Clinton and James Patterson right now called The First Gentleman, and one of the things they talk about in that book is exactly this. Eventually, if we're going to owe too much money that we won't be able to take care of anybody, okay, we'll have barrelfuls of money to go to the store like Zimbabwe had or Nazi Germany had. And so the point is, that's why a lot of us are mad. Then there's other things that are going on in the bill. But Jim Jordan is absolutely right. Pass the big bill, and then we can work on the things in the bill that need to be fixed, because they can easily fix the things that can be problems. But the Democrats' doom and gloom, I disagree with Emil in this. The only thing that would historic, and I mean historic midterm, where the party in power in the White House doesn't lose seats. And the reason for that is if the economy is doing fairly well, and everything in this bill plays out like Trump has said it will. Now look at the tariffs. He got crucified for that. No recession, nothing. So they're now saying, wow, we had it all wrong and the Trump administration had it right. And these are coming from economists. So I'm telling you, this bill But Jim Jordan, my point is, Jim Jordan is absolutely right. Let's play with the things that are in the bill that can be problematic, and he's absolutely right about that. And I think it's going to backfire. I think it's it's good. I think it's going to backfire on Emil's side.
Let me jump in, Emil. Go ahead, Emil.
All right.
The downstream effects of this is where you hear a lot of propaganda, and I want to just sort of be more blunt. Let's go back in time to the tax cuts from President George W. Bush. Let's go back to the tax cuts from President Ronald Reagan. Let's go back to the tax cuts from President Trump's first term. They all exploded the deficit. The thing that they said they wanted to reduce, they didn't reduce. It was a combination of factors. One factor was—
I said that already. I agree with you.
I agree. But hold on.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The one factor was that they cut revenue, and then they also didn't cut spending. The other side of it is the priorities for spending. One of the reasons why America is great as it is today is because we've spent a lot of money on infrastructure. When you cut the kind of budget that they've cut for infrastructure, you're also reducing the impact or the potential impact of future commerce. Part of the problem in America is we're still riding on the coattails of the New Deal. We're still riding on the coattails of the 50s and the post-World War II economy. We don't talk about this enough, but if you don't reinvest in American infrastructure, which this bill does not do, and in fact cuts much of the investment for American infrastructure, you're limiting the growth of the future economy. You cannot do all of this at once. And part of the problem with the propaganda is that we're limiting it to what's happening now. And everybody's looking at the next election. I'm looking at 20 years hence. If we haven't fixed the American infrastructure, if we haven't produced the infrastructure necessary for the future economy to what Shelley says, can the economy grow? There's a top-end limit on that economy if you do not make these investments, which this bill cuts.
So let me jump back to it now. Let me jump in, y'all. Let me jump in. Let me moderate.
Hey, yeah. Well, I got to a spot. I got to a spot to get.
Oh, you got to go to your spot. Okay, thank you for your time, brother. Say your last thought before you go then. If you can catch me. Yeah, I didn't know how long we were going to be able to keep the brother, but I'm glad he jumped on for the time that he did.
For sure.
But
thank you, Shelley. If you got to go, bro, we appreciate you.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask you, Shelley, not Shelley, but Emil, I wanted you to respond to, again, as I say, based on which media I'm watching, I'm seeing two different Americas, it seems like, right? And so if I go here is to weed through the propaganda, I think you have to respond to where Shelley highlights based on what he's seeing, and he's right about how the economists are coming back about the tariffs, right? The tariffs were doom and gloom just 2 months ago, and now the economists are saying, oh, this is actually working out. Like, I'm seeing that myself when I look at it. I'm using that as an example to highlight this. When he says, hey, when it comes midterms, which is usually when you see the president, the confusion was happening in our recent history, when the president has walked in with the House and the Senate, the midterm is where you get the flip. What he's saying is right now, if this continues to play out as it is, he feels confidence they will actually maintain it. So I want you to respond to what is happening in America in the sense of, I hear your point. I'm not disagreeing with you that the long-term ramifications, I think you and Shelley actually agree on. But as far as what's happening now and what's happening in America and us weeding through the propaganda, the reality is there are enough Americans that are satisfied about what's happening now that Shelley tells you he's feeling confident that they're going to maintain during the midterms. And what's your response to that from your side of things?
So there have been a bunch of special elections around the country that have disproven that point. You've had some either red seats flip blue, or you've had some seats that were in jeopardy of flipping, not flipping. Because right now, this one big, beautiful bill act is now one very ugly bill for a lot of people. And I think you're going to see a wave of voters who were disinterested prior to this election, a bunch of people who did not vote in the election between Vice President Harris and President Trump, who are going to vote in the midterm on the other side. And the other side is that there's not a whole lot of disinterested voters going Republican, but there's a lot of disinterested voters who will probably vote Democratic. And I think that's where you're going to see this split. you're going to find out that a lot of people are very displeased with how the country's running who did not vote in the last election and will vote in the next one. And to be confident, I think is a misuse of your energy. I think you're going to see these people because they're being energized. No King's Day, no matter what the propaganda around it was. The fact is, millions of Americans came out to protest what they see as something negative happening in the nation. Those people are being pulsed regularly because they will be voting. At least a portion of them will be voting. Many of those people who didn't vote are seeing their nation look like something they don't want it to look like, and they're going to vote. And I think Jim Jordan's confidence and their momentum is based on, I think, an assumption that's incorrect. And that is that the engaged voters from last time will carry the day. I think the disengaged voters from last time are going to be the difference maker for the next election.
Now, that actually makes sense to me just from a standpoint of the disinterested voters, for the most part, are like, what does this have to do with me? How does it affect me? And I think what you're saying is we're about to see some of it affect them, their actual lives, and some of them are already being affected. So to your point, what side will they come out on? Because I always highlight 1/3 of the country picks the president. Like, that's something I love highlighting on this show, to remind people 1/3 typically are, to your point, disinterested. Brother Brent House says Shelley speaks as if these are uniform tax cuts, but middle class cuts are set to expire, while cuts for the wealthy are permanent from the start. Is that how you see that as well, Emil? Just want to get a quick response to that before I play another cut.
Yeah, so the 2017 tax cut, right? The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act had sunsets for a lot of those tax cuts across the board. And those sunsets were beginning to kick in during the Biden administration because it was a sort of phase out approach for those tax cuts. They reinstated those tax cuts. So now looking at the entire tax bill, you're going to see those cuts not expire. So the question is that, because I haven't read all 930 pages or the Senate version, which was just cut like 4 days ago, right? So those tax cuts, if B House is correct, which I assume they are, and the reason why I would say that is because the biggest lobby for those tax cuts was also the wealthiest. Middle-class people don't typically have a strong lobby. So their tax cuts are not going to be emblazoned in concrete like they will for the people who have the
money
number of lobbyists and the most money in Congress. So let's see how it plays out after we read what was passed. Here's the problem. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as a Republican, said, if I had known what was in this bill, I wouldn't have supported it. How many senators and how many Republicans have the same thought? And now they're going to find out that they voted for something for which, if they had read it in detail, because it was rushed through so they could make a artificial July 4th holiday signing, will actually send them regrets. And those regrets are going to come out in town halls. They're going to come out in polls.
Yeah, let me do this just to keep us moving. But it sounds like they're going to have to go back to the table here, the next period where they can take other shots at it. If what you're saying is true. Here's a big area of concern that I don't think we've ever, in my personal opinion, have ever been as smart as we could be about healthcare. And here's one of the Congress people highlighting what they feel specifically is going to happen with healthcare. You may know what's true more than myself, but this is definitely an area of most Americans.
And what does it show? The bottom 10% of Americans will actually be poorer as a result of
it is a massive redistribution of wealth upward, accompanied by gigantic cuts to critical programs for the most vulnerable. So given that, tonight, let's talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill, what it contains and what it will actually do. When it comes to healthcare, there are lots of cuts, both big and small. For instance, the bill fails to extend tax credits for healthcare premiums under the ACA, while adding burdensome paperwork that would make it hard for people to remain on the plans they already have. And I know that might not sound like much to you, but it's estimated those tweaks alone will lead to 4.2 million people becoming uninsured, which makes them pretty consequential tweaks. Many are worried that federal cuts to Medicaid will mean that states are likely to cut things like home and community-based supports, which will have huge consequences for those who rely on those services to literally keep them alive, as they have been trying to make people understand.
20% of Erie County residents receive Medicaid services. including more than 100,000 children. But that funding is now in jeopardy. Advocates for people with disabilities say cuts to Medicaid could mean cuts to home health care, services that literally enable some residents to get out of bed each day.
I really truly believe that without Medicaid, without my direct care workers, my personal care assistants, I would be dead.
And when you take all of the bill's provisions concerning healthcare together, the CBO estimates they'll result in 16 million more uninsured people in the year 2034 than would otherwise be the case.
Yeah, I hate that I lost Shelley here because he obviously highlighted that the thing that he hated the most about the bill was the deficit, the fact that that was not cut. Many GOP, if you will, Congress people are saying the same thing, right? That's the part they have the most. But one thing that was highlighted way prior to President Trump presenting this bill was that Medicaid would not be touched. So I hate that I don't have him to ask him specifically how, based on what I just saw, how does he feel about what the bill actually did? Because I'm wondering how do they even say that all the promises are being kept? Because here's the thing. Again, for those who are for the president, they feel like a lot of this bill kept the promises except for the actual deficit part, right? They feel like most of it keeps the promises. But I do know one of the promises was no cut to Medicaid. And so I definitely would be curious to hear a specific answer to that. Emil, what do you think the answer would be in the sense? Is there a way that they will walk around and say, well, no, we didn't touch Medicaid. What we did was this. And then it in turns affects Medicaid is kind of what I would assume the conversation would be. But to me, everybody keeps saying this is what's going to happen to those on Medicaid. Your thoughts?
So this bill hides a lot of the impact to Medicare, Medicaid in language like John Oliver said. And this is very important because it's a very savvy way to reduce the amount of people on Medicaid and Medicare. You don't necessarily have to cut the dollar, although they did that, but they made it more cumbersome to enroll or stay enrolled. Those two things alone are going to be a problem for millions of people. And it's not just doom and gloom. These are facts. This is why they put that wording in the bill. This is why they put those requirements in the bill, is to make it harder to stay on the program. It's make it harder, not because people were abusing it necessarily, although that's the language they'll say they used, but because they know they can cut the rolls. And the problem is that those rolls being cut are going to affect people. According to ABC News that reported yesterday, 300 rural hospitals may close because of this bill. Rural hospitals are so important in America because they're the only source of healthcare within roughly 90 miles of anywhere, right? So you're talking about people now having to travel 2+ hours to get regular or routine healthcare because of one bill. These are things that people can't read all the time in these bills. I didn't read it. The average voter's not going to read it all. Even the people,
the Congress people ain't read it.
But the impacts are going to be solidified in stone. And that's the problem with this bill. You take your time and build it. If it's really that important, you don't rush it through. But they rushed it through because they knew there were so many unpopular provisions. It was hard to pass it without doing it in the middle of the night, super fast. Now, if you want to talk politics, Shelley's going to tell you all about the politics of it. And the politics were absolutely brilliant. The problem is the impacts are not.
Yeah, I even heard, like, for example, because Shelley highlighted, for example, that, well, a lot of people that didn't get off are people that shouldn't have it. You know, he said that before he left or whatever. But here's a perspective that I've been seeing all week from people that are doing the numbers on specific areas and specifically in healthcare. But they've been highlighting for even those who are on it, whether there should be or should not, that the reality is hospital costs are kept down based on how Medicaid goes, how much percentage goes to a hospital. And so to explain why just to explain it real quick on here, why the rural hospitals may actually close is because those rural hospitals, 30 to 40% of their income is coming from Medicaid. So this actual cut, they financially just won't be viable. Like most of us that are in business, if I have a 30 or 40% loss one year, I might go out of business that year. But if it happens a second year, I'm definitely out of business. And so So what people are not thinking, they're like, oh, okay, we're getting people off who don't have it, but those hospitals that lose significant amount of income means our prices actually have to go up in order for that hospital to stay available. So that's something
you're 100% right, Montoya.
About.
As you kind of read through all of this data, which is coming from people who are trying to it's really kind of frustrating when people talk about that. I don't see an effect right now. Many of the decisions we're seeing, they won't have an effect for 3, 4, 5 months in a row. You're not going to see those effects until next year. A lot of the president's policies won't kick in until 2027, 2028. That's a very normal way that these effects go downstream, because just because a law is passed, there is a mechanism that's required to implement that law, to enforce that law, and to make sure that law is properly interpreted. And all of that stuff takes time to flow into the economy and become part of the economy. So you're not going to see, so people say, well, look, nothing bad happened. It's 2027. It's going to take about 2 or 3 years before you see the major impacts of this bill. By that time, a lot of these rules will be cemented and people's lives will be affected. So it is not just doom and gloom. It is actually trying to predict what will happen, because of those permanent changes are hard to undo. And again, if you do change it, it takes 2 or 3 years to impact the economy.
No, it makes sense. Let me move us along. One of our commenters says, and he told everyone what he was going when he got elected, what he was going to do. And I always highlight that for his approval rating is around 45% or whatever currently as we speak right now, and it's kind of maintained that for the last few months, so it hasn't went down, if you will. But to Mickey the Magnetic Mama's point, which is why I think we still see two different Americas at this point, saying, hey, because some people voted for what he promised he was going to do. So for them, it's in incomplete alignment. For those who did not like what he was going to do, and now that he's actually doing it, they're like, hey, we were worried that he was going to do this, but it isn't coming, just to be clear, it's not coming as a shock to those who wanted these things. I'm just kind of make sure that I keep that.
It's not coming as a shock to any of us who've been watching or paying attention.
No, absolutely.
But I will ask his supporters, did those eggs come down yet?
I thought they did. Am I wrong? I thought the eggs did come down. A lot.
It depends on part of the country. They haven't come down nearly as much as they were promised.
Okay, got it.
And what does it show? The bottom 10% of Americans will actually be poorer as a result of this bill, with the biggest benefit going to the top 1% of Americans. What is also quite clear is that this bill is not entirely paid for. Even after all of those cuts to Medicaid, all of those cuts to Medicare, all of those cuts to the Affordable Care Act and nutrition assistance and on, they don't come close to paying for the cost of the tax cuts. So how is the rest paid for? It isn't. Just tacking on more and more to our national debt. For people in the bottom 10%, they will experience a 4% loss of household wealth. Meanwhile, for people in the top 10%, they will see their household resources increase by 2%. It is as simple as that. You explained, because of the size of the deficits, because of the pay-go or pay-as-you-go act, that would trigger sequestration of Medicare, and it would total over $500 billion. The official figure that CBO confirms is $535 billion in cuts to Medicare.
What the hell are Republicans so afraid of? What the hell are you so scared of that you guys are holding this hearing at 1 o'clock in the morning? It's a simple question that speaks to the heart of what's going on here, and one that I'm going to keep on asking. If Republicans are so proud of what is in this bill, then why are you trying to ram it through in the dead of night?
Which we talked about on the last show, right? And so, again, this is where I hate not having both sides of the, I know Leo, think kind of agree with you, that when we're doing it. But to me, that should be the alarming to, in my opinion, all of us as Americans, regardless of what your political affiliation is. You know what I mean? The guy goes on to say, hey, why is this not at 1 p.m. so that everybody hears what you're putting in this bill versus you doing it late at night. So that alone seems like something to, in a sense, be concerned about, in my opinion. You also got a real comment real quick from Brent, who just simply says what we already said, that the Medicaid coverage, reduces traditional insurance, pays more, everyone premiums goes up, which is what I highlighted as well. So that's the thing that you may kick off people who don't need it per se, since that's the talking point. But at the end of the day, we all are going to be hit by the insurance increase that has to take place once these hospitals are no longer getting the Medicaid money. So I'm just kind of highlighting that as well. But I just wanted to highlight once again, I think doing it in the middle of the night should be alarming regardless of what political point you're on. Let's keep this one short because I got a lot of other cuts I want to get to.
No problem. I'm just going to say this, Montoya, because I think it's really important that we're in a space where using time like this is bad, because if there is a true emergency, when you should be doing bills at 1 a.m. because there is a national emergency that does require that kind of thing, you've just cheapened that process. And it's great politics. Leo said it last time. If you're really trying to do it, the Republicans will spend the night at the Capitol. Democrats like to go to bed. But the problem is the American people are also being shortchanged because they don't get a chance to see what's going on either.
Nah, good stuff. Here's a cut I happened to catch, Tucker Carlson, now that he's no longer affiliated with the one side, if you will, because he's on kind of independent on his own. I caught this cut and thought it was pretty interesting, and I think it relates to exactly what is our concern as the people, if you will. I thought what he was saying.
Republicans refuse to talk about economics, like actual economics, not bullshit economics, GDP and tax cuts, but actually like, it's too expensive for my kids to buy a house. What are you doing about that?
Right.
And the answer is absolutely nothing. Other than yelling, you're a socialist. I'm not insecure about being a socialist. I don't really care what people call me. But that is a much bigger problem than anything Iran is cooking up in its centrifuges, as far as I'm concerned. Certainly a bigger problem for everyone I know. My kids can't buy a house. Therefore, they can't get married and have kids.
Right.
Like, that's what we as the American people care about, right? I think, how do you disagree with that, right?
This is where policy becomes very practical, right? So we want to take policy out of Washington, D.C. and put it at the kitchen table, as it were, right? People on Main Street are feeling the effects of a lot of these policies, and they don't really have a voice. The Republicans have been reticent to go to town halls because they're hearing some of this pushback that Tucker Carlson's making a very clear point about. My kids can't afford a home. What are you doing about that? What does the one big beautiful bill do about these very practical things that are happening? These are all high policy issues that the bill covers, and they're very political issues. And yet, when it comes down to brass tacks, like the price of eggs, which I did check with the Fed, the St. Louis Fed, the price of eggs has come down for the last 3 months. So I was a little bit wrong on that one, but it's still higher than it was before the election. But the other part is that these kitchen table issues are going to drive voters who didn't vote in the last election to want to vote again. And those are the things that Tucker Carlson's highlighting to his listeners. We're seeing problems that aren't being solved by the people we entrusted to solve the problems right in front of us.
No, fair enough. And again, politics it's a muddy waters. I mean, like, for example, I always say at the end of the day, politics equals personal interest. That's just an analogy that I've been using for years. And so I can understand how people see it as all bad. I can understand how people see it as all good. And the reason I can understand it is not that I'm trying to play the middle here, Emil. What it is, my stocks are up. Like, I'm just keeping it real. I'm a beer vendor. So I've been living off tips for the last 9 years. So I can't wait for them to not tax my tips. But I'm just kind of highlighting, again, going to personal interest, which is what I see Tucker Carlson doing there, saying from a personal interest standpoint, let's talk real economics. Now, at this point, he was calling out the Republicans or whatever, but you've been talking about for the last 40 years how the Congress people, our elected officials, are really not paying attention to our dinner table conversations, regardless of whether they're Democrat or Republicans. And then unfortunate reality, something that we highlighted going into the election, is some of these very same issues that you're highlighting that are good, that are in this bill, that over time will come to hurt us in our pockets as individual Americans. We highlighted how the Democrats failed to highlight how they had a record of doing well with that within the last 2 years. And I see the guy doing the 8-hour thing in Congress to stop the bill, but they still don't highlight how they actually helped the individual American keep money in their pocket by keeping costs down with medical. I'm trying to say a certain word, but it's leaving my mind. What I'm saying, so I'm just kind of highlighting that they're still bad at the politics. So people are going for the propaganda when what's hurting me daily, when you actually do something good, one party has no voice around highlighting what they've done well. I'm just kind of still pointing out that that's still a reality, if that even makes sense, or if it makes sense in this moment.
It does make sense, but Montoya, like you, let's focus on tips for a minute. If you go into the bill, it's a good thing that your tips are not taxed, but there's a limit. $25,000 of those tips are not taxed, and then after that, you're taxed, right? If you're overtime, $15,000 of overtime is not taxed, and then you're taxed. So when they say no taxes on tips, let's make sure we're accurate. No tax on some tips, not all tips, because a lot of people make more than 25 grand per year in tips, and they're still going to pay taxes on that overage. That's a good thing, and it's a great tax cut, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but I'm also not going to celebrate it when it's incomplete in that case. And then if you look at some of the other rules for taxes on tips and on overtime, $150,000 per year, you start to phase out.
Yeah, well, this is what I want to focus on, Emil, if you will. I maybe I can make my point clear.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is,
I'm talking about the idea of our Congress people not having the dinner table conversation. That was partly why I said.
And I was getting to
that I get.
Let me say this part really quickly, and I'll be done. In order for the politicians to hear the dinner table conversations, the voters are going to have to stop voting based on what they know and start voting on what they want. And that's the problem, because what they know are incumbents, and incumbents win at about 93 to 95% around the country. And what they want is somebody who's coming in to do the things that we've talked about in the past, which is new ideas and some fresh ways of solving some of these problems by hearing what's going on at the dinner table. The dinner table is not the font of all wisdom, but man, is it pretty accurate in terms of what pain people are feeling. And until we have politicians who are responsive to that pain, we're going to see big old bills like this pass through. And it's not just the Republicans, the Democrats did it too with the ACA. It's a lot of this stuff happening at the same time, and people are tired of it, and they don't know what to do other than complain. Vote is the answer.
No, fair enough. And I always, again, as an independent, I love voting out in comments, like regardless of party. Like I love voting them out. And I'm not saying people should do what I'm doing, but I'm just highlighting to your point that I love voting them out. And I still think we should ask every congressman on both sides to just get rid of Citizen United. That's why we're getting, that one thing is the reason why corporate America has too much power when it comes to how our the voting power that we're up against. I think Citizen United just unifies too much of it in the hands of the corporations. Let me see. I got one more comment here, and I'm gonna play another cut. Kenny77 says, "Smoke and mirrors. They ain't doing nothing for the poor, but they're making the tax credit permanent for the people at the top." Mobile Eye says they will wrap up a bunch of things you not want and a bunch of stuff that you do. Yeah, that's the reality of any of these bills. You're not going to get everything you want either way. Let me go to this next cut here. This is something I wish we definitely had Shelly for, but one of our viewers sent me this, and I thought it's something that we have to talk about. So this is actually Stacey Abrams.
When autocrats come to power, there's a 10-step plan, and we're at about step 9. So step 1, you have a free and fair election, but it's the last time, because once that person wins, they don't intend to let anybody else or anyone else take the power that they have amassed for themselves or for their ticket. Second thing they do is that they exceed the realms of executive power. So you see a bunch of executive orders coming out claiming all kinds of powers that a president doesn't hold. Number three, they then take the competing versions of power and try to either make them complicit or neuter them. So you have a Congress that basically has forgotten they got a job, and then you have a judiciary that's either complicit or neutered. And it's neutered because if the president, if the executive refuses to follow the rules, then you've neutralized the judiciary because the judiciary doesn't actually have enforcement power. Number four, you go after the media. With the media, you make sure that you demonize and criticize the legitimate media so that nobody trusts it. And then you create an echo chamber so that the only truth that people hear is the truth you want them to hear, even if it's not truth. Even if you put truth in the name, it's not true. Then you start to gut government. You fire all of the people who know how to do stuff. You break democracy by making people think they don't need it. And the best way to do that is to make sure that the things that they've learned to rely on are no longer available. Because then you become the only way they get what they want. So you fire the CDC so that vaccine rates drop and the disease rises. You fire FEMA so that when there's a natural disaster, the only way you get what you need is by begging for it. So you gut the civil service so that no one can actually do the work that democracy is supposed to protect us for. At the same time, you hire a bunch of people that you call loyalists, and you put them in place so that they don't hire anybody who doesn't agree with you, but you also put them in positions of power. So then your next step is that you go after the people who do the good work. So you sue law firms, you sue philanthropies. Then step 7, you got to have someone to blame. They've blamed everybody. They've blamed women, they've blamed children, they've blamed people of color, they've blamed immigrants. They are doing all of that because they know at step 7, if you can push that forward, then we're fighting each other and fighting for survival instead of fighting for our country. And then you start to incentivize private violence. That's step 9. Maybe you send the National Guard and Marines and you militarize kidnapping people off of the streets, throwing them into detention camps, and then arresting people who dare to challenge you, calling any question obstruction of justice. Civic participation, the First Amendment, is the 9th category because if you can militarize your response, you also convince people it's not worth the possible pain of calling out the problems. And once you've gotten to step 9, step 10 is easy. You make sure no one ever votes again because now you've got them captive, now you've got them scared, now you've got them poor, and now you've got the power. That's autocracy in 10 steps.
Man, I need Shelley right now.
I hate that she broke it down. Step 10 is probably the one I would have the most heartburn with because we will have elections, but the problem is that as the power consolidates upward, those elections are going to be less and less important. However, I don't think we're at the precipice of that point yet, but we're rapidly careening toward it, and I'm really concerned for what she said on those each of those steps because you're seeing those steps happening in real time. And we're sort of dismissing it as politics. We're dismissing it as because you can still go to the park. You can still go to buy your groceries. You can still do the things that you used to do. The difference is that the things that are happening behind the scenes are rapidly changing. And one day when you decide that you would like to speak out on something because you believe you have a First Amendment right to do so, all of the things that Stacey Abrams talked about may affect you, and it's too late to do anything about it. The one thing I learned in the military that I appreciated that helped me a lot in terms of why I fought was because I said, I'm fighting for the right of the person I like least to speak out on what they believe. And when I did that, I remembered that sometimes I was looking at a vocal KKK member like David Dukes who would say things that absolutely offended me. But I said, you know what? I don't want the government shutting him up because if the government shuts him up, they'll shut me up. And now we're at a space where the government's shutting people up, it's snatching people off the street and with people who do not have name tags, who do not have badges, who do not have warrants, and who are in masks. And you have to ask the question, what type of nation allows that to happen without any oversight? And right now, you're not seeing Congress step in, and this is what Stacey Abrams was talking about. You're not seeing Congress step in and ask the question, what's happening? Why is it happening? Who's doing it? And are they authorized to do it? They're just stepping aside. And there's a lot of danger in not having a Congress, even if it's the same party as the president who's not doing its job in oversight.
Yeah, I would highlight that what she laid out sounds like in a sense, a blueprint in quote unquote Project 2025. And again, I don't want to belabor it because I don't think it's fair. Should not he have a response to from the other side to say, hey, what am I looking at? What am I weeding through? Because I would be curious, is it something that in a sense a Shelley or a Leo would own, that the blueprint seems to be relatively in place? I just happened to see this comment as I was preparing for the show. Again, we're living in two different Americas, and I'm not saying personally that we are. I'm saying people are having this viewpoint. So let me just be clear when I keep saying that. But right now, I say but just from the standpoint, here's a comment from someone currently who even wanted the BBB to pass as is. And she was responding to someone. She says, dude, prices are lower. Food and gas, stock market is up without inflation, and the bogus smoke tariffs are working. Companies are coming to America opposed to outsourcing. The borders is closed, and the BBB has passed. So when you say, what type of country do we want to live in? Again, I just continue to highlight there are people that are happy with the way things are going. And I'm not telling people how to side with that, but it's not a situation where everybody's saying, hey, it's all doom and gloom. And again, I'm not telling you how to think. I'm just highlighting if your perspective is everything is going well, keep in mind, for example, as we said on the show, some of these things that have happened in this bill are going to make your costs rise. If you think everything is doom and gloom, there are plenty of people who are saying, no, this is working well for me based on their individual situations. So again, at the end of the day, we have a right to our personal interest. This is what I would love to highlight in this, because this comment came in as well. And I want to make this real clear for this comment. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Oh, the comment might have just went away. I was about to put it up. So hold on. Oh man, I hate that. I literally just clicked on the comment and it went away. I didn't know it could go away. But someone had said don't tell people just to vote. Don't tell young people just it's not just vote. In a sense, young people need to know what they're fighting for. And I wanted to clarify that if you're watching this show and we're not making clear, if nothing else that we're not making clear is be very aware of what you're voting for. You literally, Emil just highlighted on this show that people need to vote for what they want at the dinner table. You just highlighted that. So I just wanted to respond to that comment, but whatever, I guess it got taken down. But I was highlighting, if you're learning nothing else on this show, that's why we're providing you resources. Kind of read between what's happening and what's not happening, trying to give it to you with no propaganda so that you are better informed for exactly what you're voting for and how. And we consistently say, make sure you're paying attention in not just the general election, all the other elections, be a part of those. So I just wanted to push back against that comment to say, if you're doing it, if nothing else on this show, that's exactly what we're doing. I saw another comment that said, so this is not what's happening. I don't know if they're responding to each other in the comments or go ahead, Emil.
No, I think he was responding to how I framed some of the things happening with ICE and masks. And I will just say this, that Rashad Marsh, Rashad, thank you for commenting. Really appreciate you participating in the discussion today. But there have been many legal aliens who have been snatched up when they're going to their mandated appointments. These are not illegal people. They were adjudicated to stay in the nation legally, but that's not the point I'm making. My point is that the way they're doing it is what I'm concerned about. If you're really legitimate, you should not have a mask on. You should have a badge. You should have a name tag, and you should not be in unmarked vehicles snatching people off the street. There's a way to do things in America that allows people to know what's happening to them. There have been many instances of people being snatched up or potentially snatched up by people pretending to be the police, pretending to be ICE, and that is a danger. And I'm not cool with it, and none of us should be cool with agents of our federal government going places without the proper identification to take people into custody.
So let me ask a question about what you're saying. So help me understand that if there are people pretending to do it, help me understand how that relates to all of this in a sense. And I'm not saying people should do that, but I'm saying how is that a consequence of what we're doing as a government? I don't think I understand your point when you say
right.
that.
So for me, imagine that you are on the street and someone accused you of a crime, and someone not in a police uniform, masked with a gun, said, "Come with me, you've been accused of a crime." What would you do? You would push back. You say, "I'm not going with you. Identify yourself."
Right.
Well, that's what the federal government's done as policy, is it's telling people they've been accused of a crime or that they are an agent of the federal government without proper identification, and they're taking them off the street and putting them in unmarked cars with no way of knowing where they're going or who to call or how to protect their rights. And they do have rights, even if they're undocumented.
So help me understand how that relates to the people pretending to be agents. That's what's throwing me.
What I'm saying is now under the cover of that lawless behavior, people who are actually criminals can mimic the federal government's actions, and you wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, I respect what you're saying. I just wanted to understand it, so that's fair. All right, so we're going to go into our extra innings as we always do, which we kind of go into a whole different subject matter anytime we do extra innings, as we call this. We read our hour now, and so this was very interesting. I had one other cut I really wanted to play, but I realized I didn't save it, so I'm not going to take the time to go get it and put it on here. So we're going to go in an entirely different direction. Thank you for, in a sense, a great show about the actual subject matter, but I just came across this and thought it was super interesting and wanted to get your thoughts on it, and I'll give some thoughts as well, and we'll close out the show. Thank you for all the watchers. Make sure y'all are sharing this show. And at the end of the day, we are attempting to weed through these different political cuts to give you no chaser, no propaganda as best as we can. Again, we do have our own opinions. We don't always get that right. And like I said, hate to lose Shelley today, but he was in a situation where he couldn't stay on with us. So our goal is to always have both sides so that we can make sure we are doing our best to provide our opinions and weed through the propaganda. All right, but this is, again, takes us in an entirely different direction, but I think it's applicable to this moment. So this is another reason I chose this cut.
Do you know we can pinpoint the exact moment when black people became Democrat?
Really?
And it was a 90-second phone call. October of 1960. Nixon and JFK are embroiled in the tightest race ever. MLK is in jail. He's always in jail, but they're about to put him in this penal farm in rural Georgia. Coretta, his wife, pregnant, she's frantic. She picks up the phone and she calls Nixon's camp. She says, "Hey, here's what's going on. Can you pull some strings? Get my husband out." Nixon blows her off. She picks up the phone and she calls JFK. 90-second phone call. JFK says, "I'm with you, whatever you need." Yeah. She gets off the phone, tells her father-in-law, MLK's dad, MLK Sr., who's the head pastor at Ebenezer, who at the time was a registered Republican. He says, "I'm a Democrat now." He recruits all of his pastoral friends, gets all the black newspapers. They go on this big campaign to get JFK in office. JFK wins by 100,000 whatever votes. Here's what's interesting. In 1956, Eisenhower was a Republican. He won with 60% of the black vote. In 1960, JFK wins with 70%.
There you go.
Of the black vote.
Wow.
Now, I tell that story not to say what swung people was empathy.
Yeah.
That's what, and I feel like that's what's missing today.
I agree with his last comment more than anything.
Look,
and it's why we end up playing for a team and losing out on our interest and letting those who are now in the position that we voted them in to kind of pull the wool over our eyes. So I love that last part of his comment. Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
Empathy is a real thing. And one of the things is that Eisenhower was an incredibly popular president in both of his elections, 52 and 56. And when Nixon came in, Nixon had many flaws, one of which was his lack of empathy. But he ended up winning in 1968 anyway, because he was able to understand what he did wrong, but he also used the Southern strategy. What Kennedy did, though, was more than just empathy. He also made promises that he and LBJ kept over the course of 1961 to 1969 when he and LBJ were president. Those promises kept, cemented, and even LBJ said, "I'm about to sign legislation that's going to permanently create the Republicans in the South." He knew exactly what he was doing. So it was a matter of both empathy and policy that were affecting those people at the time. And those were political calculations on both sides. But if you go back before that, you can look at the political calculation of President Truman, which sort of broke the mold of what Democrats should look like. President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, which integrated the armed forces. He had no political reason to do that. None. So that was the crack in the armor that the Democrats had in terms of the old Southern Democrats or the Dixiecrats. And then you saw in 1960 that came to pass with that empathy and then those policies. There was a 12-year gap, and that was when you saw Eisenhower do so well among Black voters. But we didn't forget that there was something there that President Kennedy was able to latch onto that turned us Black people primarily into Democrats. It wasn't just empathy. There was policy behind it.
No, fair enough, man. I definitely wanted to bring that to the table. Very interesting clip. Hope y'all enjoy. Make sure y'all are sharing. Make sure y'all are subscribing. More importantly, that's what the last clip here will say. But thank y'all for joining. And we tried to get as many of your comments in as we could. Great show today, brother. And we'll see y'all next week. We try to pop up once a week. It varies just based on me getting all these brothers together. As y'all see, I wasn't able to get all three of them on today. We're chasing each other around. We try to do the best we can and at least make it to y'all once a week. So episode 34 is in the books. Definitely share, definitely subscribe. And we're actually, for those who do know, I have the Mental Dialogue show. I'll just make a quick plug here. I'm actually doing a pop-up show, an additional show tomorrow, the Mental Dialogue Perspective, as we discuss. This will be interesting, Emil. If you get a chance, check us out in the morning. 10 o'clock in the morning, going to be talking about, I don't know if you've seen the clip floating around where they're highlighting how involved Black men are in their children's lives based on some of the recent studies, which kind of kill some of the myths. We're going to put myself and Latrice, who's more of a data hog than myself. We're going to literally put some actual factuals to the numbers, because the story is not exactly right, whether you're extreme and say Black men are not involved. It's not exactly right, even with, and I'm saying just getting the context. That's what we're going to bring. We're going to bring the context. Yep. And the context is not to make one side right or wrong. I'm always of belief you can't make correct solutions if you don't have correct assessments. So we're going to dig into the involvement of Black fathers in their children's lives. The numbers are increasing, which is a good thing, but we got to put it in context. So that'll be the show tomorrow, the Mental Dialogue Perspective. See y'all hopefully in the morning for those who are able to join. Definitely see y'all next week if you like what we're doing with the Politically Conscious show. Thank you, Emil.
Always. And thank everybody out there who's watching and participating. And thank you for sharing us. But most importantly, thank you for your participation in the political process. That's what matters. We're doing this for y'all so you can decipher some of this stuff for yourselves and make some good decisions. Keep pushing your agenda. We need you to do that because your agenda works for all of us when you're active about it. Thank you.
Hey, I'm about to go extended. I got a comment from Rashad Marsh. It says, tangibles are what Black people need. I'm gonna offer that you must be new to the show, because we can consistently highlight the actual tangibles consistently that have happened for us personally, that continue to happen, especially locally. Like we did a whole show on Georgia politics and broke down specifically the different bills that are coming forward that you can get involved in to get those tangibles. We absolutely need tangibles, but we specifically speak to tangibles. We're not having conversations about rhetoric when it comes to politics. It serves no purpose to do this show for the reasons that we do it, just to be talking politics. That's not what we're doing on this show. So again, I would assume you're new to the show if you don't think we talk tangibles on this show. We literally are sending people, we didn't do it today, but we're literally giving people resources. Go call your congressman, here's something you should be pushing for. Oh, this update is coming. Like this in Atlanta, that little surprise election that we had just a couple of weeks ago. So many people thank me for letting them know, oh, go vote today, because of it was an opportunity to keep our heating and cooling costs down in the state. So yeah, definitely. All right, thank you. He is new. Again, I was taking offense to that one, boy. I'm like, you know what I'm saying?
Well, we do.
Like people.
All right, hey, Rashad, we love you, man. Thank you for being me.
For sure.
And keep pushing us, man. We want to respond to you. So thank you so much for that.
Nah, thank you for that. Yeah, man. We keep it heating and cooling costs down in Georgia with the last vote. And that was just about 3 weeks ago. It's all good, brother. I'll let y'all.
All right, man. We'll talk.
Yeah, for sure.